Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the next generation. We pray that you would continue to work in and through us, give us wisdom, give us guidance, give us direction. Pray for favor and anointing. Pray for divine conversations, not just today, but as we work to impact the next generation and steward the gifts and graces that you've given to us. Thank you for Santis and his leadership, not just to us, but to his district and his denomination as well, and even his friendship. It's just been such a blessing to me personally in the last couple of months. Be with us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Awesome.
Amen.
Well, Pastor Santis is going to take us through some things today, and I know one of those he's already, I think, started to work to set up some meetings and some whether it's phone calls or in-person deals. And so we want to make sure you have an opportunity to be a part of that as well. So let us know if you want to get put on that schedule, and we'll try to make that happen as well. I'm going to mute myself and let you take over.
Awesome. Thank you. I am putting my email address in the chat. I've talked to a couple of you, maybe 3 or 4 of you about this. And one of the goals that I have in this role is to, one, do these sessions once a month, but also to have what I would call site visits. Now, I know being a student pastor myself and working in Next Gen, site visits can sound like the principal coming to the classroom. And and so just know that's not the goal. Is not to make you feel nervous or any anxiety or anything like that. But really what I would like to see happen is, and my first one is actually this week, um, is to spend a little time when I come to your city, spend a little bit of time with you personally, one-on-one, whether that means I take you out to dinner or take you to lunch or just have some coffee. Also, if it's possible during the site visit, if there are any leaders that you want to bring with you, if it needs to just be a one-on-one, we can do that. But if you'd like for it to be some of your team, it doesn't have to be all of your team. It can be some of your key leaders or maybe even as a student or like whatever it may be. That's totally up to you. But the goal is to come to spend time with you, to spend time with your leaders, to see you and your ministry in action, and just to be able to observe. And what I've learned is sometimes, being in these kind of settings, I get a view of kind of you and your needs is totally different when I'm at your church and looking at kind of how things are flowing, how you're interacting with students, how you're leading your team. It just gives me another viewpoint of how of knowing best how to support you. So my goal is to get to every church before the summer and to be able to spend that time with you. And if you're interested and open to it, giving you some feedback of what I saw, what I experienced. Now, here's the other possibility. Some churches, when I come, they say bring some students with you and let them be like secret shoppers, so to speak. And so I could bring some of my students. They can tell you what they think, and I can do that as well. So we can do both. Like I could come by myself one time. I can come later with some students. Just know that that's available. And like I said, my first one is this week. I'll be at Cross Point on Thursday night. So just wanted you to be aware of that. And feel free to sign up with me. I have a few of you already lined up. It's great if they are not Wednesday night and Sunday night, because that's typically when my youth group meets. But do have a schedule where I can have a teaching team, so I can leave on a Wednesday night or leave on a Sunday night and be with you even while my youth group is going. So just know that that's still a possibility. For those of you who do kids ministry, I can come on Sunday morning and be with you there. If you have kids ministry at another time, we can work through that, which I think 1 or 2 of you do. So just know that that's kind of the plan, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with you. Sound good? Awesome. Well, let's jump into our topic for today, and that is fundraising. a glorious, glorious topic. And I've been in the youth ministry, Next Gen world for a while, and this is not one of my favorite topics. Is not one of the ones I enjoy talking about. But I literally, like literally had my leader meeting last night with my team, and this was on the agenda. Like, how are we going to fundraise for camp? How are we going to fundraise for future events like international missions trips and domestic missions trips during spring break? Like, how are we gonna plan for those? So that's kind of the context of our conversation for today. But let's start with a little bit of an icebreaker. And I want to just hear from you if you've had any fundraising fails. Fundraising fails, fundraising snafus. So let me just give you an example. So I was new to a church, new to leading a youth group, and I decided to do it on a Saturday afternoon. I was excited because I just knew, like, that that's not a bad day for most people because most people are working Monday through Friday. I don't have to deal with Sunday. And I did it on an October Saturday afternoon. And I was so excited. I was so excited. I had planned everything out. I brought it to my team and I'm pitching it to them in what we call the village council, which was kind of my leadership meeting. And all of them, like, there's silence, like absolute silence. You know, and I'm like, what is going on? Come to find out, I've scheduled this thing on the day of what we call the greatest homecoming on earth, GHO, which is North Carolina A&T State University's homecoming day, which is the second largest moneymaker in the city of Greensboro. and and initially I'm like, wait a minute, y'all love Jesus? Like, we gonna, we gonna do this, we're gonna be countercultural. And they looked at me like, bro, like, no, like, this is not wise. And so I had to change my dates, like change everything. So that was just a fail. It was early enough in the process to where I didn't have to spend any money and lose any money or anything like that. But I lost a little credibility with my people that I would think that it was possible to schedule something on GHO. So just wanted you to hear that from me. That was years ago. I've had a few fails since then, but that was a pretty significant one early on. Like, any fundraising fails that you've had, just to get us all on the same playing field. None of us are perfect. All of us have missed it sometimes. Any fundraising fails?
I'll go. So back when I was at my previous church, we did a car wash on a Saturday, but the challenge for me at that time was I feel like the adults did all the work and the kids are just kind of standing around. So yes, we made a little bit of money, but I felt like we could have done more if the teens were more motivated. And so I feel like that's an epic fail on my end, like trying to get them motivated. Same with, like, we did a pancake breakfast. We were trying to get them to camp. And again, like, scheduling it at 8 a.m. and teens do not want to get up early. It's a Saturday. They've just had the whole week at school. And so maybe not scheduling it on during school, rather doing it in the summer when they're off would have probably been a little bit better. But anyway, those are my two that I can recall at the moment.
That's so good. Dates, youth involvement, time. Yeah. Any others?
I'll mention a bad one, but this was probably more along. I was young, leading people that were just a few years younger than myself. I had a work ethic, but not still struggle with this, not a great level of communication. So I say I have a high level of expectation and a low level of communication, which is a bad combination. And we did a car wash, which can be really good. This is South Louisiana, could be really good. if you know how to wash a car and you make sure everything's clean when you're cleaning the car, the car doesn't end up dirtier or scratched afterwards. And so it was one of those things where it was bad all the way around. For we fortunately the car that did get scratched up, they didn't care too much, and so that was okay. But we had cars that left dirtier than they arrived, and just people out there, this teens just having fun, like throwing water at each other. And it's like you want to have that fun, but you're like, we also got to earn some money here. And if there's any grace in any of that, like one of the last cars that came to it, I'm sweating, I'm tired, I'm so frustrated with these kids. And one of the last cars gave us $500 for what we're doing. And it's like, well, that was worth it for everything, because I was really questioning my life, call, salvation, a lot of things. But I'm thinking, we started this thing $100 in the hole, and we're probably going to end up $300 in the hole after everything else. But yeah, I would say the positive of that is you never know what's on the other side of doing something. But just communicating clearly the process, like Pastor Wendy was saying, you just helping lead people through that, and probably working smarter, not harder, is a good one.
Yeah, them car washes, man.
And they're no good if they're raining either. So
That's true.
that's scheduling's a big issue when you're trying to work around community events, you're working around sports, you're working around the weather. And then on top of that, like here at Christ Community, majority of our youth do not even attend our church. So we're trying to play techno tag and trying to contact parents and get them involved, and we can get them to youth group and we can get them to some of the event, outings that we do, but to tackle them and to get them to come to a fundraising event is not on their radar.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. So it requires another level of creativity and innovation. Yeah, excellent point. How about others? Any other fundraising fails?
Well, when the adults take over, and like Pastor Tim was saying, the adults are more active than the kids are, and like Wendy was saying the same thing. You are more babysitting than you are fundraising, so it can be challenging to rein them in, especially when they're at that point where testosterone and all sorts of other things are going on in their head. They just the focus is an issue with them. So yeah, it can go south real fast.
Yeah, and I think like what has come out of just a few things that have been shared so far is kind of how I want to lead into the conversation, because I think it sets up some of the things that we need to do if we're going to do it well. And one of those things you've already heard, and there has to be a level of planning and focus and training before you do any fundraiser, right? Like even if it's a car wash, right? Like there needs to be a time before the car wash actually happens where you are training the students on expectations, on whether it be how to wash the car, or like there needs to be some kind of training, some type of like orientation before the fundraiser. And so what that does is that sets expectations. It sets expectations of what we are trying to accomplish. It sets expectation of different roles that people will have. Like nobody's going to do everything, but everybody's going to do something. And we need to know like where we're going to place everyone in this entire process. So things like car washes are pretty simple, right? Because you have a very clear goal, and that is to clean the car, right? But then you have other goals, right? Which is the marketing of it. You have a goal of like loving the people who are coming, like whether that be, out by the road with the signs, or whether that be when you're taking the money, asking people if there's something you can pray with them about. So everybody has a different role, but the goal is to love the people, clean the cars, right? Represent Christ. And so you want to be able to, before the car wash or before the pancake dinner or before something that's popular with our folks is a chili cook-off, like before those kind of events, to really set the stage. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here are the goals of what we want to see done. If we don't make any money, here's what we want to make sure happens. If we do make money, here's what we're going to do with it, right? And so those are the kind of things. I remember another fail for me, and this goes back into the planning stage of it, is I had all these students like doing this donut and drinks, a fundraiser. I'm sure you all know this, but you can go to Krispy Kreme with your tax ID number, and they'll give you like dozen donuts for like, I think $3 or something per dozen. And so we had all done all that legwork. We get the donuts there, we sell all the donuts, and then I realized I never like took roll on which students were selling the donuts. So it's after the event, and I'm scrounging up other leaders like, who remind me who was here, because they're gonna get like a percentage. So it's just one of those fails of like the one of the important pieces is who actually was there and who actually worked, because you had some people who were there, but they were more there to eat donuts than they were to actually sell donuts. And so there's that piece of it. So the planning side of it is thinking through the fundraising event from start to finish, right? How do we prepare? How do we execute? And then how do we follow through or follow up with who actually was a part of the fundraiser? So you want to think about it in three phases: leading up or starting it, getting, marketing of it, and then the execution of it, and then the follow through or follow up of it. Like those three phases are all equally important. So I see someone, John, put in information about a golf tournament. That's a great idea. Um, and then you have one on here that I was going to mention too, which is like a parent night out. Like that's a pretty easy peasy. um, the parent night out is a huge money maker, because you typically don't have to put a lot of money to do it. You just need the space and some food, right? So just get inexpensive food, whether you make some spaghetti or order some cheap pizzas, and you get about $25 to $35 a pop for each child that stays for 3 to 4 hours a night, which is actually a good deal in terms of childcare for most parents. And so yeah, that parent night out is a huge one, especially around before Christmas time, because parents want to get out and buy gifts. They don't want to take their kids with them. You give them a few hours to get away to do that. And some of them will use it as a date night. Others will use it as shopping. But you can do the parent night out just about any time of the year and make a decent amount of money off of it. The Y does it all the time. I just sent my youngest to the Y Friday. So like the church should be able to do it too. But you do have to have the right facility. You do need to have space where they can kind of play. Usually you do a movie at some point that gets you about an hour and a half worth of time. And then it's just kind of sandwich things around the food and the movie. And if you can do that, you're in good shape. But let me talk to you about a couple of different ways of thinking about fundraiser just from a logistical standpoint. So one is to think about it as a individual fundraiser. So some people will fundraise individually for certain things, and then some people will fundraise like as your kids group is doing something or as your youth group is doing something. So you can think about it those two different ways. And then thinking about where you can actually get the funds from, I want you to think about it in basically about six ways. One is, and I'm gonna put these in the chat. These are typically, and I'm leaving some out, but these are typically the ways or the funding sources that you're going to get money from. And and here's something I want you to think about ahead of time. So part of what sometimes gets lost in fundraising is there's this idea of competing. And every church kind of has a different philosophy on raising support or raising funds, and whether or not you do that up front, whether or not you do that um, through other communication channels like your email distribution list or during your youth groups. But one thing to remind your team and your students of is that one of the goals of fundraisers is to make it easier on families to allow to create space for their students or for their kids to participate in life-changing or catalytic events, so catalytic moments. And so the goal is to communicate. We're trying to make it easier on the family. If that message comes across very clear, then most people won't fight you. But if we just kind of just talk about fundraising for fundraising's sake, you have a lot of different places where you're going to run into walls, because the philosophy that a lot of people have is that fundraising is extra, or fundraising competes with tithes and offerings, or fundraising is not something that the church should do, that we should be able to get from our tithes and our offering and our budget everything we need. But you and I know that that's not always true, especially if you have young people or families in your church where finances is already an issue for them, like they're already operating in the deficit, or they're already overtaxed with things that they have to be responsible for. So the message that I try to say to leaders all the time is that fundraising makes it easier on the families for their students, for their kids to be able to participate in life transforming moments. It's important to add those two things. Easier on the family, they can experience more life changing or catalytic moments. If people get those messages, they usually will help you. But if they're only thinking about just raising some funds for whatever, then they may not catch the vision. But easier on families, life-changing moments. That's what we're fundraising for. Does that make sense so far? And then here are kind of the fun. So think family, like some people will be able to get some of their fundraising through family circles, family networks of church. Of course, the church becomes one place to fundraise. The community, like what are some community events? I think Garrett, you were talking about like how hard it is sometimes with all of the things that students are already doing, like what are some community things you could partner with, right? And then there's district funds sometimes for these kinds of things. And so calling your friendly district superintendent to find out, is there funding? Like I've been surprised sometimes and when I talk to a church about how they're doing their fundraising, how few of them have thought about their district. I am surprised. It's almost like it's not even a thought. It's like, well, you do know that your district might have something. Now, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there is no funding. Sometimes there is no precedent for it, and that's fine. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't ask. And then the denomination, like there are times when we may have funding that is set aside. So, for example, we had we gave away about $90,000 for Follow. We gave away 90. And that was through grants that, transportation grants, that was through free registrations, but people submitted applications. We went through the applications and we gave away about $90,000 worth of grants and scholarships for Follow. So sometimes it's local church, sometimes it's district, sometimes it's denomination. And then depending on like what you're doing your fundraising for, so there are ways that you can fundraise for these different reasons, like a retreat or follow or camp or missions trip, but you may be fundraising for a new program. And if you have a new program at your church, you can actually write grants, right? State and federal grants for your church. I just talked to a church 2 weeks ago who wrote a grant for $400,000 from their state government, and they got it. It was for after school church program. So this is a Wesleyan church, young church plant, $400,000. So don't despise the day of writing to your local leaders, your state leaders, your federal leaders, because you may get funding there as well. And then you got to also think about the different tiers, right? So if I were to put this up on the screen for you, if you think about these different tiers, and so most retreats are going to be somewhere between $50 to $100. Follow, for example, is a $250. Camps are usually about $300 if they're for the whole week. Missions trips are usually somewhere between $1,000 to $3,000. And then you have new programs. And so you want to think about different fundraisers for different things. And here's one of the things I learned, particularly starting with a newer youth group, is try the smaller fundraisers first. Don't start with the big ones. Start with the smaller ones to kind of build just interest, number one, and two, to kind of build into the students why they're doing it and how to do it, right? So you almost get practice with the smaller ones. The smaller, easy ones are the ones you want to start with, and then move to the larger. So for example, a larger one that we're planning for right now, is a student versus leader game, right? So we take over a gym at one of the local schools, and we have a basketball game and a volleyball game. Sometimes we might do a kickball game, but because each time, what we're trying to do is get as many parents and as many leaders from the church involved and as many students involved. But that requires renting a space or getting it for free. That requires setting up concessions for the event. That requires someone taking like registration, because we usually sometimes will have something like, t-shirts or something to commemorate the event. Somebody will donate the t-shirts or whatever. But that's multiple layers of organization, right? And that takes time. And those bigger events are going to yield more funds, but they take more time to plan, right? And so you don't want to do something like that first. You want to do like the donuts and drinks, because that's easy, right? You just get the donuts from Krispy Kreme or your local donut place. We just make lemonade, right? So you sell the lemonade that you've made, you sell the donuts, and then it's just a matter of keeping track. Like, you're probably going to make a few $100s, right? It's you're depending on how many you're trying to sell. We just do them after church on a Sunday morning. So those are easy ones. The kind of low-hanging fruit don't take as much to plan, but you're really trying to see who your workers are, like who are your serious people on fundraising. It also it begins to fan the flame, because then you can say to students or to kids, like, we did a fundraiser, where were you? Right? Like, you're trying to go on this trip. Like, we just did one. We did a low-hanging fruit one. You don't say that, but that your first two were probably going to be low-hanging fruit before you get. So now you're getting most of your people on board before you do the big one, right? So you want everybody on board by the time you do the larger event. Does that make sense?
Can I jump in and ask a quick question real quick, Pastor Santisi? In your experience, maybe anybody else as well, once you get probably the culture of fundraising in, it's probably a lot easier to do the events and the cycles of the events. How long would you say it takes to go from doing a small one, like if this is just starting out, how long should people expect to do the small fundraising events to get up to then the larger ones and to get other people in the congregation on board with that as far as just culture change?
Yeah, it depends. It usually depends on the church, and it depends on the point leader, right? So one of the things I haven't mentioned that I will say, if you can, if at all possible, have someone else be the point for the fundraiser, right? Like if you can, right? If you can't, then you just can't. But one of the things I try to do is get someone else who's like highly administrative, but also highly relational to be the person who is behind the fundraiser, right? People respect them, but also they can handle details. So if you can find a person who's the point person, that's number one. I think if I were to answer your question directly, I would say you typically need 60 to 90 days to set up larger fundraising events. So if you were to schedule something right now for a big fundraiser, you need to be thinking about late May, early June for a big one, right? Like one of those like um the student leader gathering one or game. Like that's a big one. You need about 3 months. Now some people can pull it off in 30 to 60 days, but it depends on the culture of your church and how often you do fundraisers. Um, so here's the other thing that I would lift up that I never underestimate simply announcing something from the stage and saying, we would love to see if a few of you would be willing to sponsor a student or a kid going to this, whatever that event is. So for example, at my church, we had 4 people step forward to pay for an individual to go to follow, right? So think about that. Like that's roughly $1,000, right? Just from announcing it from the stage. You're not gonna make $1,000 on your donut and drinks. You're gonna make maybe a couple hundred if it's a good day, right? So sometimes just announcing it from the stage and just saying, here's what we're trying to do. Remember, we're trying to take some of the load off, make it easier on families, and we're trying to allow students to experience something transformative that's life-changing. Just keep those 2 things in mind every time you talk about it. Lighten the load for families, transformative event. So announcing that from the stage can wield more people than you probably would think. And then you want to think about what are the passive things, like what are passive fundraisers that we can actually do. Some of those, and this, Garrett, kind of ties into what you were talking about. Find ways to partner with a local restaurant, find ways to partner with a local grocery store. And all you have to do is set up the day and give people a code or tell them whenever you go to this restaurant on this day, make sure you tell the person at the register you're with, whatever the church may be, right? You're with Parkway, or you're with One Church, or you're with Cross Point, right? So and so that's a passive way. So you don't have to do a ton of planning, except for getting the date set, and then you just start marketing it. You just start telling people like, go eat at Chick-fil-A on Friday, and we get part of the proceeds, right? Doesn't require a ton of planning. You don't have to do any cleanup or setup. Just get people to Chick-fil-A, or just get them to Publix, right? And have them announce or give them the code to say, I'm buying in partnership with my local church. Sometimes we forget those passive ones. Those can actually come through in a big way if you plan it and you market it really, really well. So let me stop there. Any thoughts or any questions so far before I move to kind of the next phase?
What were some of those restaurants that, I mean, if you know off the top of your head or anybody else, I'll just put them in the chat, that are good for like the evening partnerships and stuff like that? I think Zaxby's does some. They probably all do something.
Yeah, almost every restaurant does. It's a matter of the local branch. Well, not branch. Is that what do you call them?
Franchise.
franchise. It's about the local franchise and that manager, and whether or not that manager is willing to do it. But almost every restaurant does, like fast food, and almost every grocery store does. So it's just a matter of getting in there and start having conversations. And those are things you can do a couple times a year, right? 2 or 3 times a year. I say try to do one a semester. And you just passively get income that goes into your budget. And most of them will either write you a check or they will do some type of ACH deposit, direct deposit into your church, once they've completed that process. So yeah, easy. I won't say it's easy money, but it requires some organizing. But
You're
you
not going
don't.
to scratch any cars doing that. That's the good thing.
That's right. That's right. And the other cool thing is you don't have to leverage any money, right? So most fundraisers, you have to bring some money to the table, and then you have to like pay that off before you can actually get anything in the positive. But with the restaurants and with the grocery stores, you don't. Like there's no upfront cost. It's all just the code, and they give you a percentage of those purchases. So let's make some a few of you talked about this, and I'll share a few of mine. So the last thing I want to talk about is just some of the ideas, right? Like I've heard some strange fundraising ideas, and I was sometimes surprised at some of the stuff that worked. So let's hear some of your ideas. We talked about the fails. Like, what are some of the fundraising ideas that you've done that have worked? And maybe they're very reliable fundraising ideas that you've kind of gone back to the well over and over again. So let's hear a few of those, and I'll share a few that I've seen or have done myself.
We have a
Well,
traditional Brunswick stew that we do every year, and we sell out every year, and then the funds are divvied up among the different parts of the church, whether it be youth or general fund or something like that. So,
Mm.
so it's a traditional. It's been going on forever. So, but it
So
requires a lot of people cooking. So
give us your snapshot of how you organize it, how you implement it, and then how you follow through with your.
I've only participated with that. They usually they pick that date out where they're going to cook all morning, and then the sales are done. They're prearranged. You can put your order in, and then that day they're cooking early in the morning. They get a trailer that's got 2 big pots on it, propane burners, and it's pretty routine because it's been done every year. So, but it just requires the guys from the church is what, the men's group is what usually takes control of that. So, but in past we've messed up, and here's one of those fails. Sold more than we had, so people were showing up without a product available for them, and then so now we've gotten to, I think we've gone more digital, where they pre-order it and pay for it, and we know how much we've sold, versus, oh yeah, we sold a bunch of tickets and people are showing up with it, and we have no Brunswick stew for them. So, but as far as the details, I mean, I've just helped gone over there and cooked, and the youth have participated with stirring the pot and whatnot. So
Yeah, and developing that tradition is sometimes helpful, that people just expect it, right? So that can be helpful. So you don't have to market it as much. You just let them know this is when it's happening.
yeah, because then it goes fast. So
That's good.
yeah.
One of my churches, it was poinsettias. And, you know, we would sell poinsettias around Christmas. And so that's one of those examples of just kind of a traditional thing. Another one is around Christmas time is this was actually the most lucrative fundraiser I've ever done in all of my next gen time. And that was allowing the church to be a site for a craft show. And so basically what would happen, they would set it up on a Friday afternoon, and we would have a craft show in our building all day on a Saturday. And so the gym, the foyer, not the sanctuary, some churches would have to do it in the sanctuary. But for our building, it was almost every room except the sanctuary became spaces, and we would simply we would give people a choice of how large their craft exhibit would be, and that was the thing we charged. So one slot might be $75. If they want two, then now it's going to be $150, right? And we would sell those spaces. And some spaces would be more expensive than others because they were kind of premier traffic flow spaces. And so then the day of the craft show, so we're not spending any money. We're not spending any money. The whole craft show is people bring crafts, or they bring things that they sell, like vendor food or whatever. And all we do is mark off the space, make sure you have a table, and make sure you have everything that you need. So they do all the selling. All we do is rent out the spaces. Most lucrative I've ever done. And it became very just like you said with the Brunswick stew, it became kind of, people expected it. And so that one year we didn't do it, and people were like, where's the craft show? And we're like,
Where's the
"Sorry,
craft show?
we don't have enough time to plan for this." So
Yeah.
but it does require a lot of coordination and a lot of communication, but it doesn't require any money. Now, you may decide to like in the craft show be an exhibitor or be a vendor. Like that's when, you know, you might do donuts, or you might do pizza for lunch, or you might do whatever for the vendors in the room, and then you could sell something and have to trip in. But that was one of the easiest ones. It was just a matter of figuring out what Saturday of this in December we were going to take over the building. And yeah, it was really good, really good. How about others? What are some ideas that you've that have been successful for you?
Um, kind of like you mentioned, or like I put in the chat earlier, but the one that we did it for the first time this past December for some students going on a missions trip. I don't know how it would work on a grander scale, but it worked well for us with our team of like 10 students, was the childcare thing. And I mean, we weren't sure how many people we were going to get. We kind of planned. And so we were like, we had signups and all that. But what was neat was that a lot of people that may have not donated to other things like would bring their kids, because we were offering them a service in exchange for a date night or whatever. So instead of just asking for donations or saying, hey, like something that they don't really need or want, like, I don't know, random things that you may sell and they don't really need them, but they're like, I'll throw some money. They were like, well, we actually could use this when we go out on date night or gifts. So we saw a lot of people that may not donate to other things such as mission trips or camp or whatever, but they're like, I'll pay $25 for my kid to come. So that was kind of neat. And we reached multiple different audiences because we also did a like food thing after church for the same missions trip. And some people came and gave $50 for a bowl of soup or whatever, but we reached a different audience with that childcare thing. So it was really simple, easy. I mean, all we did was we bought cheap pizza, like you were saying. We had a sign up thing online, and then when they showed up, when they came to pick up their kids, we had our Venmo on there or whatever, and then we also offered or accepted cash or checks. So it was little planning other than putting on a movie, getting the pizza and popcorn, and then our teens watch the kids, which they do on a regular basis anyways for life groups and different things in our church. So it was a easy thing, and it paid off like 4 students trips that we had left. So that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, John, I'm glad you mentioned that. Like one of those big pieces is making sure like when you do the fundraiser that you have different paying options. Don't just do cash. Try to make sure there's, depending on your church, what's the best way. Some churches, like we do ours through our app. And so typically before the event, we would have our, um, somebody from our team to make sure there's a drop down icon that says that event. So that whenever people start coming and they don't have cash, we say you can go to our app and just click on this to give and click on the name of this fundraiser. And then, once that fundraiser is over, that drop down is taken off, but it becomes a way from an accounting standpoint to track how much money is coming in electronically. Um, but some people may do Venmo, you may do, PayPal or Cash App, or some people do Zelle as well. So you just figure out what's the best method for your church and make sure that there's a electronic option, not just cash. Because there will be a lot of people that want to do it, but they don't have cash. Excellent point. Excellent.
One of the things that we used to do, well, two things. We had movie night, where parents would bring their kids, and it would be a Christian film or cartoon type film, that they could bring the family to raise money. But our biggest one was yard sales. We would, it's a lot of work. There's definitely a lot of work that goes into it. One of the pastors that I worked under at the time would go around with his trailer, and he would look in the newspaper, because back then you had newspapers, but you look in the newspaper and see who had a yard sale, and we would call them up and say, hey, we're raising money for our youth. Anything that you don't sell, may we have it, and we'll come get it. And then we would go and pick up the leftover stuff, and then we'd have this big huge yard sale like twice a year. And that was probably our biggest fundraiser that we did, and people got rid of their stuff and we made money, so it was a win-win. But it is a lot of work involved, so much so that I said I'd never do another yard sale again in my life. But but it does bring in money, and people will give over what you put on things, so that was a blessing as
Yeah, that's so true. That was on my list too, Wendy. Yard sales, like they are money makers. Once again, no money up front. Like you're better off when you have something where there's no money up front, where all the proceeds go into your, the positive side instead of having to pay something back. Excellent, excellent one. Now, did you all do your yard sale at the local church, or did you
at the
do it at someone's
church.
home?
Yes,
Yeah, that's
yes. We would have it inside, because during that time it was a little bit colder in the mornings, and so you didn't want everything to get wet, and we could set it up the night before, or the whole week we would be prepping to set it up inside in the basement area.
mm,
And then and then that way all you have to do is unlock the door and people can come in and shop and do that. We did have it on top of the hill at one point. Never again. Like that. We had those old tables that were metal that weighed like 1,000 pounds, and we were lugging those up that hill. And yeah, it was a lot of work. But I mean, we made money, so it's a blessing. But yeah, there was a lot of work that went into it. And yeah, but it worked out great in the basement level. If you can have one, I would say definitely have it inside, especially if it's hot. People can come in and it's cool in there, or if it's cold, people can come in and it's warm. All you have to do is have coffee or water, you know, and people get to shop at their own leisure. And yeah.
excellent. Thank you, Wendy. Brian put something in the chat. Since I'm in food service, it is very easy to do to-go meal twice a year to pay our district budget. We ask every individual in the church to buy 5 tickets for $10, whether they want a meal or not. They just tell us how many meals they're picking up after church. Almost 20 adults do it, and we make a very easy $1,000. Meatloaf is most popular. Yeah, food is a big one, right? If you can get the right people to organize food, you do have to organize it though, because, like Garrett said, you could oversell or undersell and be left with a bunch of meatloaf trays. So you want to plan it and kind of scale for, what you anticipate you're going to get. It's a judgment call. Like even with donuts, right? Like you can buy a bunch of donuts and then just break even because you didn't plan well. So you want to get a good idea of how many you're going to sell and try to make sure you sell out of whatever you do with food, so you don't have anything left. Is prepared. He said meatloaf is never left over. I love it. Um, so any other ideas? I know one of the things that is becoming more and more popular now is GoFundMe. So some people are doing GoFundMe accounts, and I'm amazed at how many people actually get things through GoFundMe. We've done, some of y'all might look at me funny when I say this, but I've been at churches that have done spades tournaments or Madden tournaments. So spades, of course, is a card game. It's just a tournament of people who, have the bragging rights. So there's no money exchanged. It's just in terms of like people participating, but it's simply, you get a trophy and people just give to the church as a part of the tournament as a donation. So there are things like that. Any other ones that you've done that have been, I think Wendy mentioned pancake breakfast. We talked through car wash. Any
We did a
other?
change for change, which means like
Mm,
we would give everybody a bucket and they would just put in their miscellaneous change for the week. And then on Sundays, they would all come up and everybody would pour their change into a bigger bucket that we had at the front of the sanctuary. And we raised a lot of money like that because kids can participate in that. They have change in their little piggy banks, and youth is always storing up some change, and you get home, you clear out your pockets, you have change, and so, and of course you would get dollars, and people would obviously donate tens and twenties and stuff like that too, but it would all just go into this big change bucket, and we raised a lot of money like that as well.
Every summer, we do a escape room event. My wife loves designing escape rooms, and so she's always trying to plan one of those. So we do those for the youth, and one of the parents actually had the idea last year, like, you should, have some small groups go through here and do it as a fundraiser. So it was something we were already doing. It was something that was already set up. So the students had gone through it. And so some of the ones who needed to earn that extra money for camp are like, hey, come help us set this back up for small groups later in the week. And so we were kind of on a time crunch some of the time because we needed to have it cleared out so we could use this space for overflow the following week. So that was kind of rough, but it ended up going pretty well. I think if we had more time, trial and error on it, I think we would be able to get even more participation, but we just had to be like donation based and the small groups come through. And that went pretty well. I think it was really important what you said though about asking just from the front. We've been surprised, maybe you can play the video from camp last year or the follow wrap up video or something like that for your whole church and just be like, we want to take more students to this. And we've had a lot of people give that way. We've also, this might be a regional thing, but there are coupon books. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that idea where it's like students can sell them for 20 bucks and they get, I don't know, like 10 bucks off of everyone that they sell. That takes a lot of organization as well and forethought. That was probably one of my fails from last year. Was we wanted to keep it simple, so we said you're paying for camp, so you take the cash and use it to pay for camp. We had one student who hadn't gone to camp before. He got his entire camp paid for because people were like, "Oh wow, I don't need a coupon book, but here's $50, enjoy camp." And then we're a month away from camp, and I'm like, "Hey, you said it's paid for. You gonna sign him up?" And mom says we're going on vacation this summer and he can't miss any more football practice. And so he can't go. I'm like, all right, well, let me know. We'll use it towards follow and he can go to follow. And I haven't heard from them since. So some things like that where it's like, oh, live and learn. But
Yeah, man, those are tough ones. Those are tough ones. Yeah, you kind of look back and you're like, what could I have done differently?
it worked really well for a lot of our other students. And so a lot of them had half of theirs paid for or something. And so it's kind of like, it's tough. But
Well, here's something in closing is kind of, and you have to figure out how you do this at your local church, and maybe you have a policy, but kind of our policy is we say to every parent and to every student, like we never want money to be the driving issue of your participation. So if you really want to go to something, no matter the cost, like we'll help you figure out how to get there, but it may require you stepping up to do some things to ensure that amount. So but we don't believe in just giving away stuff because sometimes what you just described, Josh, happens is if they don't have any skin in the game, like they may just back out last minute or whatever. um, but we do say, okay, if in order to go on this trip, here's kind of the plan for this particular, like we'll have a general plan for anybody that wants to go that doesn't have the money, but then we may have like a specific plan for a certain student, given what we know about their family and their financial situation. But that's kind of our policy. If you want to go, we'll make it happen, but you'll have to help. And sometimes it's not just the student that has to help. Sometimes the parent has to has to help, like with some type of service project or with helping us spearhead a fundraiser or some other type of requirement that we may put down. And sometimes it's just normal stuff. Like, when I was at a church that was a church plant, we just said, you just got to help our production team set up for the next 2 months every Sunday. Like you got to help the production set up. You got to be at 6 o'clock. And that's your payment. And so it's not always the fundraiser, but it could be something else. But any other final questions or thoughts before we transition? This has been really helpful to hear kind of how you all are fundraising, some of the challenges you've had, and just know there's plenty more I could give you, but it's all I can do in an hour. But if you have any other questions or you want to process fundraising, because I didn't even get into the missions portion, like when you're really fundraising for something really big, like a international missions trip, like how that's very different than other fundraisers. But we could talk that through. And there's some organizations that can help. I think Tim put something in the chat about one organization that helps with those kinds of things.
one thing that I've found helpful too, I know my context is just youth ministry, but trying to have the parents like put out in front exactly what you're saying, right? We don't want money to be an obstacle. I generally try to have, we can create forms within our website. And so I think if you have Planning Center, you can make forms. But I make a form that essentially is just asking them what amount do you need, per student? Because a lot of times it's like, I have 5 kids, who they 2 want to go to kids camp and 3 want to go to youth camp. And so I can only afford $100 per student. And so this is how much I'm asking for. And so it gives you a place where it's all organized within the responses to the form. That way you can be like, okay, so I need this much, you can add it up. It'll be like, okay, I need this much plus more, obviously, but for my students to go, I need this much. And that's been helpful to me to at least be able to get a ballpark for goals and whatnot, and then be able to help, especially I think with camp, and then have those students earn it, so they get the skin in the game. And so it's like, okay, help us. One year we cleaned all of the toys in the church for all the kids' rooms, and I took another kid to do some cleanup after a tornado or something like that, so they could earn it. So they put the skin in the game and have to work a little bit for it.
Last two things I'll mention. One is pray that God will reveal to you who in your church has the gift of giving. Pray that God would reveal who those people are. And those are people, like I had one in one of my churches, and I literally would go to him and he would say, whatever your shortfall is, I'll cover it. And never wanted his name mentioned. He just said, if like whatever you don't have left, I'll supply. And so you sometimes have people in your church who, maybe they're retired, maybe they're a business leader, and they may have the funds to be able to back you, but you just got to pray that God will reveal them. And then you want to steward that relationship well. Like, don't go to them about everything, but be very prayerful, wise about what your asks will be. The guy that did every shortfall, he was one of my youth leaders who had his own business. So he was already involved. And so that was a unique situation, but that's not always the case. And then the last thing I'll say is some people, when they make those kind of big gifts, they want documentation for their tax returns. And so talk with your church about how you can, sometimes Goodwill does it this way where they say, do you need a form or do you need something? And so sometimes your church will have something that you can give them and say, this, you put the date, you put the amount, and then they can turn that in with their taxes, with their accountant or however they do their taxes. So that's another thing to think about, particularly with those larger amounts. Most people are not going to do it for $2 donuts and drinks. But those people who are given 300, 500 may want to put it on their tax returns. All right, well, I'll pass it back over to Tim. Thank you all so much. Great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll say one quick thing, just kind of procedural along the line of fundraising, and then I'll close out in prayer. Is that for youth camp, whether that's NTS or something else that you're doing? Again, the district is offering $50 per student for that. So whether that's travel to NTS or whether that's helping provide, again, our heart is anything that we don't want any obstacle be in the way of sending the student to camp. I was one of the ones that got scholarships growing up, also worked my tail off, but I had scholarships to make sure I was there. So I'm very much personally invested in that as well. But this year, instead of having like Tony Schiavone at Cornerstone or any other single person handle the transportation for NTS camp, what we're asking is that each church figure that out on their own. Let us know. There's a form, I think it was sent out with this communication, but let us know how many students are going to camp, and then our treasurer will cut a check to you for that times 50 per student very quickly. And again, reach out to me if there's anything above and beyond that for camp or anything else. We want to be a support for everybody with that. Great. Actually, Josh, can you close us out? I don't know if I've ever heard you pray. I trust that you do, but I just think it's a good time to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. Lord, we're just so grateful for everything that you're doing and these opportunities that you've given us. And Lord, I thank you for all of the ideas here, the ways that you've worked in the past to allow us to be able to do the work of your ministry, God, and to be able to provide these funds so that students can go and grow in their relationship with you and sometimes even meet you for the first time, God, and just so many other ways that this money has influenced others, God. I pray that you would help us to be good stewards of the people and the money that you have blessed us with, Lord, and we're just so grateful for your generosity, and we ask that you would help us to be generous as well as leaders and pastors, God. And I just pray for each of us, Lord, as we go throughout the rest of our week, and maybe some of us are preparing for these fundraisers, Lord, that you would just remind us of these things and continue to remind us of your love and generosity as well. We pray this in your name, amen.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Everybody, so good to be with you.